Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Wander in Germany podcast, where I show you how to see the iconic sights, all while balancing it with Germany's authentic delights. I'm your host, Leanna, and today we're going to be following up in detail, because you know that's how I roll, and we're going to expand on last week's train versus car debate as promised. So if you've decided that train travel is going to be your main method of transportation while in Germany, as much as I hate to say this, I honestly don't think today's topic will be much use for you. Although I hate to turn you away. However, next week, we're going to do the same type of breakdown that we're doing right here today, but on everything you'll want to know about train travel and public transportation in Germany. So if you aren't sticking around today, then absolutely don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you'll be reminded to come back next week when the topic is just for you. So in today's podcast, we're going to expel some major Germany driving myths. Yes, there are speed limits. Yes, there are even speed limits on the Autobahn. We're also going to walk away knowing everything there is to know about driving in Germany, renting cars in Germany, and you'll even know the main rules and laws that might be different from what you're used to. So hop on in, buckle up, and los geht's. So before we get into all the nitty gritty details of it all, I just want to first dispel this one thing that everybody always asks, either when I'm driving them around Germany or when they're, sending me an email asking about if they should take the train or drive in Germany. Is it actually really scary to drive in Germany? The short answer is no, it's not. In fact, I think that driving in Germany really isn't even that much different than what I'm used to from driving in the US. We both drive on the same side of the road. Most of the same rules are very similar. There's just that over-looming question and fear that everybody hears that Germany doesn't have speed limits, or they hear about the Autobahn and they're terrified to drive on it. The reality is the Autobahn is pretty much like the interstate or, a motorway if you're from Britain or places like that. And it's really not that much different in the system of driving. Where it's different is I actually think it is so much more efficient. And despite there being sections that no, there are not speed limits on, I actually think it's safer. So something that I learned when I moved to Germany is that it is extremely difficult and hard and expensive to get a driver's license in Germany. So for the locals to even get a driver's license, they first of all have to be 18, not 16, like I was used to in the US. And also it can take up to 2,000-3,000 euros just to get a driver's license. And it can take months of classwork, driving work. And what's really interesting is they really make you drive in every sort of situation. So they make you drive during rush hour traffic. They make you drive on the Autobahn. They make you drive in the rain at night. And here's the fun part. They make you drive in a stick shift car. So honestly, when I drive in Germany, again, this is probably a sweeping statement and probably a generalized statement, but I actually think that German drivers are much better drivers than really most places that I've driven. They are very responsible because, if you mess up, there are some really strict consequences for things like drinking and driving. If you get in car accidents over a certain speed limit, you are automatically held responsible. There's just a lot of things. And then, of course, let's not even talk about the Germans' system of efficiency. When you drive, there's always rules, there's always systems. So honestly, for me, driving in Germany is actually very straightforward. It's pretty safe, and I prefer it. In fact, I was in the States this summer, and I'm not joking when I say I pretty much had a panic attack when I was driving on the interstate. People were weaving in and out of lanes. People were passing me on my left side, which after driving in Germany gave me total anxiety. And there were freeway exits that, were on both sides of the interstate, and I never knew which side to be on. And it was overwhelming. Here in Germany, it's very straightforward. The rules are pretty clear cut. And honestly, it's really not that bad. So while I definitely want to get more into the Autobahn, especially the rules and the laws and the expectations, I want to just go ahead and take a few steps back first, because in order to drive on the Autobahn, you need a car. So let's even go back another step, because before you can even rent a car, we need to know what you need to even just drive in Germany in general. So the first thing you're going to need is you need a current and valid driving license in the country of your residence. So no expired driver's licenses. You're going to need your proof of insurance. So most Germany car rental ages actually requires you to be 21 years old. Some will even say 25. The ones that let you go under 25 often will have not fines, but definitely fees associated with that, because I don't know if it's because they don't trust people that are under 25 years old or what. I honestly don't know, but that's just how it is. So if you're under 25 years old, then sometimes taking the train is just easier about that. So one of the things that I get asked about a lot is if you need an international driving permit for Germany. Now, first of all, please note that I said international driving permit, not license. There is no such thing as an international driving license. The reality is technically no, you actually don't need an international driving permit for Germany if you're just here as a tourist. So for example, if you're staying here for less than 3 months, that's kind of the rule, is that you don't need an IDP, international driving permit. However, I will say this, most rental companies will ask for one, or some even will require it. And, if there is actually a situation where you are going to have to show, a license and a permit, to the Polizei, for example, God forbid there's an accident or just, a situation, then having one of these is pretty convenient and helpful. But again, it's not legally required. And actually, I want to make a caveat of that. I'm assuming that most people listening to this are from probably the US, the UK. I'll be honest, I actually don't know the rules from Australia. You can look those up online. I know for a fact that if you are from the USA and you are here for less than 3 months and as a tourist, legally you don't need an international driving permit. However, I still think it's worth getting. It's only $30 or something. You can just go to AAA. There's some sites online that provide it, but honestly, just go to AAA and get it, and it's done and over with, and it's one less thing you have to worry about. Another fun insider thing that I have learned after my 13 years of literally traveling the entire world is that a lot of credit cards actually offer international driving insurance. So for example, we're travel hackers, so we use points and miles to travel all over. So we have quite a plethora of credit cards. Yes, our score is fantastic. Anyways, that should be a whole other topic, is how to travel hack to Germany. But anyways, I digress. Basically, what I'm saying is call up your credit card company and see if they cover international driving insurance. Most of them do, at least a lot of the bigger brands and the, top-notch type cards do. And if so, you don't technically need it, but I always like to have them send me this document that says that, yes, we are covered with their international driver's insurance. I like to have them actually send me this letter, and then I have it in my file when we go to wherever we're traveling to. So in this case, Germany. And if there's any issues when you're trying to rent the car or from the agency, you can just pull this out and you should be taken care of. Okay, so now it's time to actually rent your car. I'm going to be honest, you guys, I use all the normal aggregate search engines like everybody else. I really don't have a super insider tip. This is actually a pretty hot topic in my Travel in Bavaria Facebook group and things like that. I actually, use things like Discover Cars and things like that to, basically it's a search engine, and it will compare all the major car rental services. So it'll compare Expedia versus rental cars versus Sixt, versus all the main ones. And then you can filter it out. You can decide which ones you want. And, that's honestly how I do it myself. So I actually have often found that Sixt, so that's S-I-X-T, Sixt, usually has really good prices and are often one of the cheaper ones. If you're looking for affordable cars, you can get ones, as low as $45 a day kind of thing. I will say that the topic of car rentals is often a hot topic in like the Facebook groups that I either run myself or admin with, the Travel in Germany Facebook groups. And there's always discussion about, what is the best car rental. And some of the people were complaining about Sixt, but also people were complaining about other companies too. And so here's what you really need to know no matter who you book with. Honestly, this is just good tips for any time you rent a car, like no matter where you're at. But when you get your car, when you get the keys from no matter who you rented it through, number one, make sure that you document the car. This is where people time and time again come back and complain about car rental companies. And it doesn't matter what car rental company. I've heard this with Sixt. I've heard it with Euro Cars. I've heard it with Enterprise, literally all of them, is that it's I had a nightmare of an experience because they are trying to charge me, $1,500 on this little bumper scratch. Okay, well, did you document that before you drove out of the airport or before you drove off the lot? If you didn't, you really have not a lot to go off of. So, have a representative come and walk the car. If they don't, take pictures of everything. Take a video of the car. Sometimes, depending on how anal you want to be, you could even go ahead and send those pictures and send that video right then and there, just so that it is documented of the date and the time, of how that car looked like when you got it. The next thing I tell everybody is you have to read your contracts. Some people complain that they're charged, an extra day because they dropped it off after hours. Well, did it say in the contract that you were going to be charged for that? If so, then yeah, you're going to be charged. My next tip is pretty specific to Germany because I've heard this from a lot of people who have tried to rent cars. I think it's been in Frankfurt in particular, but you might as well take this advice if you're flying into Munich or Berlin or really anywhere else, is when you go to rent your car, if you've booked it ahead of time, you most likely put what time you want to pick it up. I have heard so many stories of people whose flights got delayed or they got delayed in customs or picking up their luggage or, their luggage didn't show up. So they were waiting around for their luggage. And that meant that they showed up, possibly even hours after their original contracted time with the car company. And I've heard these stories where they show up and, they give them their reservation and the company's like, yeah, I don't have a car for you. And I can understand the panic in a traveler's mind if I have an entire itinerary or places to be, places to go, things to see. This is my trip of a lifetime, right? And you just told me that the transportation that I was relying on to get everywhere is no longer here, and more so that I paid for. I would get upset at that also. But again, what was in your contract? Did it say that you had a grace period of 1 hour, 2 hours, something? If it didn't, again, I know that's really crummy if you show up, but if it's in your contract, it's in your contract. So if you find yourself in this sort of situation where you're getting delayed or something like that, obviously if you're in the plane, you can't be contacting, Enterprise cars. But as soon as you arrive, most of the airports in Germany all have free Wi-Fi. Just connect to the free Wi-Fi, quickly send them an email, ask a local German next to you who's waiting for their luggage if, they can help. Call. Most Germans are more than happy to help in those situations. Call over a Wi-Fi data plan, whatever it is, just contact that company immediately and say, look, we've been delayed. I have this reservation. I need you to hold it. And most likely they will, especially if they know that you're going to be there. The problem is, if you were an hour, 2 hours late and they've got this line coming out of the center, of people who want to rent a car right now who maybe didn't book previously. Yeah, they want to make that money. They're going to book it out to these people if you were late. Now, here's the deal. I'm saying all of this because I just want you to be prepared and that you know exactly how to have the best trip possible. So I've never had any of these experiences personally, but I just want you to be prepared so that, if the situation arises, you'll know exactly how to deal with it and how to still make sure that your trip really goes off without a hitch. Some other things to know about renting cars in Germany is a lot of times you will get held, like a $1,000 hold on your credit card. This is always a refundable deposit. It's just a hold. So if you see something on your credit card for $1,000 or 1,000 euros right away, if you return the car and you return the car in the correct shape and everything like that, then don't worry, you'll get that money back. Another thing to know is if you are booking cars and you see a really great steal of a deal, just check that there's not a maximum kilometer threshold. I've seen before that sometimes they'll have a maximum of 300 kilometers, even 170 kilometers per day. It's kind of weird. And not all of them do this, but sometimes that's one of the ways that they might quote unquote get ya. Okay, so once again, I actually want to backtrack again because I wanted to get all of that out of the way because I think that some of those things are really important. But there's also some really other important information about renting a car, before even renting it, that you really need to know. So, I personally am a planner, each their own, right? But I highly recommend, even if you are not a planner, that if you are renting a car, you do so in advance. You're going to get the widest selection possible. You're going to get the best prices, probably. But honestly, it's just better to book ahead and just make sure that you have it and you have what you need, have what you want, and it's just done and over with. But here's the thing. All right, so when you are looking for cars in Germany, be prepared. Okay. So the first thing is a lot of cars in Germany are still manual transmission. So if you need an automatic car, again, you're going to want to book ahead because those go pretty quickly, especially if you want one that is in an affordable price range. So just know that if you need an automatic car, you should book ahead. Another thing that I often see is that, this is no surprise to most people who have traveled before. It's that the airport rental locations probably are going to have slightly more expensive prices than if you were to get it from in town. Honestly, something you may not know about me and Andy, my husband, is that we are extremely frugal and budget travelers, especially in our young 20s. And just to save a few bucks, we've, taken these public transportations to places, outside of an airport just to get to a rental company. I mean, it saved us a few bucks. I'm at the point in my age and travel is I'll pay the 10 extra bucks, even if it's per day, just to have the ease of getting it at the airport. Now, my only caveat to that is, for example, let's say you flew into Munich. You don't need a car from Munich. You absolutely do not need a car. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money, and it's probably going to be stressful. So that is a caveat to that is if you fly into Munich and you're going to go straight into the city, don't rent a car for those first few days. And then you can actually get probably an even more affordable car somewhere locally within the city and just get the car right from there rather than going back to the airport. Another thing that I have to kind of really laugh about is the compact cars. This makes sense though, folks. Let's really think about this, okay? If you've never driven around in Germany, then you probably don't understand the extent of these small alleyways and the small cars and the laughable size of parking garage spaces. I'm a mom. I will fully embrace that. Yes, my kids don't even play soccer, but I have a soccer mom van. I have a Honda Odyssey, and it's probably one of the quote unquote largest vehicles in Germany because people just don't drive big cars here because they really can't. In fact, if I have a choice to bike or drive, I will always bike because I hate driving my massive van in small places in Germany. I really do hate it. But the thing is that, you might be looking at a car and it might say SUV or small SUV. And the description, really look at the descriptions because often they're not what you're used to. If you're an American, it's not what you think of when you think of an SUV. So I have heard so many people who have rented a car in Germany, thinking they were getting a SUV, for example, and they get to it and it's actually what they would consider just a car. And, maybe they had a ton of big bags or they had a couple of extra people or whatever it may be. And they were cramped and crowded and didn't have space for luggage and, everything. So really make sure that you're reading the descriptions because they will say like how many people, about how many bags, and all of that. But just know that the cars here are pretty compact. Now, I also say that because if you need a larger vehicle, such as a minivan, like if you are a family traveling, again, like those are not as common. And so you're going to need to book those ahead of time. Yes, a lot of minivans are manual transmissions. So if you want an automatic, you're going to have to pay for that. And again, you're going to want to book ahead of time. The only other thing that I think you really need to know before leaving the lot of your car rental company is double check the gas type, because diesel cars in Germany are actually really common. And so you'll want to just really ensure that you know exactly what kind of gas to put in when you're filling up at the gas stations. Another insider tip is that a lot of times when you get the car rental and you get the price, actually probably will not include the 19% value added tax. That's called the VAT here in Germany. And sometimes they have extra fees like registration fees, airport fees, all of these things. So if you are like a penny pincher, no judgment, me too, or just, you're really watching your finances and making sure you have really found like the best deal. If you want to make sure that you have the total price before you book it, just contact the company, and just ask, is this the total price? Are there any extra fees? Anything like that. All right. And just a few other basic things to know before we really get into the driving part of this podcast. But when you are driving in Germany, they are going to be filling up in liters, not gallons. So I always kind of laugh at the first time I went and filled up at a gas station and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cheap. It was a third of the price. Well, that's because a liter is about a third of a gallon. And I kind of forgot to do that equation in my head. So just remember that. And the other thing that kind of gets travelers off guard is when you go to fill up at a gas station, you're going to pull up, you're going to decide obviously which gas to put in, you're going to start filling it up. Notice I did not say you put in a credit card. So again, the credit card topic can be its whole other podcast conversation. Yes, Germany takes credit cards, just not everywhere. However, gas stations always do. But the thing is, you actually don't pay beforehand. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to, like I said, you're going to drive in, you're going to fill up your vehicle. And here's the part that always makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong. Don't move your car. You actually leave it at its spot. Even if there are people behind you, this is just how it's done. Nobody's going to get mad at you for doing this because this is just how it's done. You're going to get out of your car and you're going to go inside and you're going to tell them what number gas pump you were at and you're going to pay there. Like I said, you can always pay by credit card. Now, if you want to be really nice, if you have to go to the bathroom or buy anything extra, yeah, after you've paid, go back, move your car to a different spot. But honestly, it's not a big deal. People will just wait while you go to the bathroom real quick, while you buy your coffee, whatever it is, and then you come back and you pull away. All right, so you've got the keys in hand, you've hopped in your car, you are ready to hit the road, Jack. Sorry, if you've ever listened to this podcast, you know I probably have to horribly sing at least one line in this podcast. Anyways, okay, so you're ready to drive, but there's some really important things you need to know. I'm going to first go into the Autobahn rules because this is probably one of the most, misunderstood, but also really important because you are going to be maybe driving kind of fast. However, if you plan on driving in cities, you really have to make sure you've listened to the end of this podcast because there are some very important rules that really do take a lot of conscious effort and getting used to if you've never driven in Germany. Okay, so the Autobahn. You either are super excited to get out there, because you're a speed demon and you can't wait to live that inner race car driver in you, or you're secretly terrified to get on the Autobahn. No matter which lane you're in, get it? Which lane you're in? Sorry. Anyways, so it's really no matter how you look at it, the Autobahn is basically like the interstate. You're going to merge on just like you are used to merging on. And honestly, if you don't want to drive fast, you don't have to. So what you're going to do is you're just going to stay in that right-hand lane. And honestly, anybody who wants to pass you, they will. And don't worry, they will. So yes, there are sections that do not have a speed limit. And yes, sometimes people go insanely fast. And remember, they do use kilometer per hour. So yeah, somebody might be going 200 kilometers an hour, which is about 125-ish miles per hour. But honestly, if you're more comfortable just, cruising along at 60 or, 80 miles per hour, which is a pretty normal interstate speed, so like 80 miles per hour is about 130-ish kilometers an hour, then that's fine. It's not a big deal. Now, let's say you do want to overtake somebody, you want to pass somebody, whether that's because you are a little speed demon or just because somebody else is just going slower than you want. Again, it's like super efficient and easy. You do not get into the left-hand lane until it is clear. And yes, you're going to want to double, triple check because yes, people can zip up at 200 kilometers an hour, which can come up pretty fast if you're not ready for it. So once that left lane is clear, you simply get over to the left lane, you pass that person, and as soon as you are done passing, maybe you're going to pass 2 cars, that's fine. But as soon as you are done passing, you have to get over to the right-hand side. This is not a suggestion. This is law. Now, I know what you're saying, like, well, technically it's law in the US, but nobody does it. Yeah, I know. No, it's law here, and you have to do it, which is actually really great because it actually makes for a very efficient flow of traffic. And you also, therefore, always know where a car is coming or going. Now, speaking of being a little race car driver, okay, again, you do you. If you want to drive fast on the Autobahn, that's up to you. I will say this, though, there's very little reason to destroy a good trip with being reckless and stupid. Also, one of the laws in Germany is that if you get into a car accident and you are going over 130 kilometers an hour, you are automatically at fault. So honestly, like 120, 130 kilometers is usually what I just kind of cruise at. Yeah, sometimes I'll go a little bit faster, but honestly, it's just really not worth it. And I promise you're still going to get an Autobahn experience by driving like a normal speed limit. All right, so this isn't going to be like some amazing plot twist in this podcast because I've already mentioned several times that yes, speed limits do exist on the Autobahn. However, let's talk about that for a second. So yeah, the majority of the Autobahn doesn't have speed limits and you are pretty free to go as fast as you want. But there's this huge misconception that there are 0 speed limits on the Autobahn at all. And that's just not true. So there are definitely sections. Oftentimes these are going to be like when you're getting closer to a city or if you're in a particularly, I don't want to say dangerous because that kind of gives the wrong impression, but like, areas that might have more curves or something like that on the Autobahn, then you might see speed limits. And these can range anywhere from 80 kilometers an hour, like especially if it's a construction zone, for example. And there are lots of construction zones on the Autobahn, to areas that are more prone to Staus. A Stau is a traffic jam in Germany. And yes, there are many of them. To sometimes just being, 120 kilometers an hour in general areas. The tricky part is you really have to be a very aware driver as you're driving on the Autobahn, period. One of the reasons, though, is because the speed limits can change at any given time. And here's a really fun fact about Germany. They don't put cop cars out to do speed traps. They will just put cameras out. And if you are driving over the speed limit, even a few kilometers over, you'll get what we call blitzed. You'll get flashed. And not like in a fun Mardi Gras way. No, you'll get blitzed, which is like what we call it here in Germany, which is when a camera will burst its light at your face, take a picture of you, take a picture of your license plate so that you cannot refute that it wasn't you. And then you will get a nice, pretty bill. In fact, my husband literally just got blitzed the other day for going 7 kilometers. 7 kilometers. That's less than 5 miles an hour. He got clocked for going less than 5 miles an hour over the speed limit and got a fine for it. And let's say you do end up getting blitzed. don't you worry. Your rental car will happily make sure that you get that fee. So sometimes what happens is they'll pay that fee themselves and then just charge you later. Sometimes they'll send you the traffic violation and the bill, depending on how severe it was. Either way, don't worry. You will get followed up on that and you will pay. Honestly, it can be as cheap as like 15 euros. I think that was about how much my husband's bill was that he just got. Obviously, if you're going more than that, expect a little bit more. I would say a typical speeding fine is going to be anywhere between 10 to maybe, 75 euros, depending on the severity. Also, these speed cameras can be set up really anywhere, not just the Autobahn. So especially when you're driving out on the country roads and things like that, even within cities, sometimes they'll set them up. Sometimes they're permanent and sometimes they're like pop-up ones. So again, it's just really important to always be driving the speed limit so that you don't even have to, figure out what to do with a speeding ticket from Germany after your trip. Okay, let's move off the Autobahn. And let's talk about some other German driving rules, laws, regulations, and all that fun stuff. So obviously, Germany is known for its great beer, and we all love to enjoy the beer. However, there is a no tolerance law for drinking and driving in Germany. Germans take drinking and driving extremely serious, as they should. I mean, Germans often see driving as a privilege, not as a right. And the reality is that even after having one beer, you could be jeopardizing your life, somebody else's life, and it's just not worth it, period. But what is the exact law? So currently the limit of alcohol is 0.5 milligrams of alcohol per milliliter of blood. Okay, that's not in German, but what does that exactly translate to? Well, for many people, that can actually just be one normal German-sized beer. I'm not making this up. It's not just because the beer here is strong, it is, but 0.5 milligrams of alcohol per milliliter of blood could be as small as one beer for a person. So simply put, if you've had one beer, do not get behind a wheel. Period. All right. So some other interesting rules and laws about driving in Germany that you might not be used to, and these definitely took some getting used to for me when I was first learning to drive in Germany. The first one is there is no turn on red lights. So, in the US, this is like a secondhand nature for me. You pull up to a red light and you look both ways and you turn right and it's not a big deal. Now, there are some situations where there'll be like a little green arrow underneath a red light. I know that sounds kind of confusing, but that's the only time that you can turn right on red here in Germany. Any other time, you just got to stop and wait it out. Another one, I'm not going to lie, this actually still gets me. I have lived in Germany off and on for over a decade, and this next one, I still have to consciously say in my mind, right has the right of way. So what this means is when you're driving, you are going to see different signs. One of them is this like yellow triangle. And when you see a yellow triangle, that means you are on a priority road. What that means is that you don't have to yield to the right. So you have priority and you can just keep driving straight. And that makes sense, right? Even in the US, there's certain roads that are the priority. But in Germany, there are a lot of situations where you have to yield on your right, even on roads that feel like they should be priority and they're not. So a really good example of this is in cities and in neighborhoods, for example. So you often will not have priority roads. So whenever you come to an intersection, you have to slow down to a crawl, make sure that nobody is coming in from your right because they have the right of way. This still gets me. I literally will say, right has the right of way because conscious effort to really think about. Well, those are some of the biggest rules. Another thing that you really need to be careful about driving in Germany, especially if you're driving in cities, is bicyclists. So I live in Regensburg, which is a fantastic younger university town. So we have tons of cyclists here. Not every town and city is going to be this way, but definitely the bigger ones. People in Germany love to ride bikes. In fact, like I said earlier, if I can get somewhere by bike, I'm going to choose to do biking instead of driving. And the thing is that most of the time, the cyclists are driving on or near the road with you. And so, for example, if you are driving down what feels like a very main street to you and you're going to turn right, you have to remind yourself to look behind you to make sure that to your right behind you, a bicyclist isn't also going straight, because they actually have the right of way because they are still going straight. So again, like, this is just something that when you're driving around, you just really need to be aware of. You need to know that like this thing exists because, again, in the US and most cities and most towns, bicyclists aren't really that prominent. But here in Germany, they are all over, and you just have to be making sure that you're like keeping an eye out for them as you're driving around. Now, a few other topics that I just really want to briefly mention, they're not huge deals, but again, I just want you to be fully prepared for your trip to Germany, is the parking situation in Germany. I mean this in a various amounts of ways. So I don't know if you picked up on it earlier, but I talked about the very small spaces of parking. So because a lot of the towns here in Germany are so old and were built before cars, there's not really a ton of great infrastructure when it comes to, street parking. So there's a lot of garages that people utilize when parking in Germany. Again, though, most of the cars here are pretty compact and small, which means that the spaces are also going to be small when you're parking at a garage. So just kind of be prepared for that. And not just the spaces, like as you're turning the corner in the garages, they're tight corners. Sometimes this is a stressful area for people. So just kind of go into it knowing that might be what to expect. The other thing I want to kind of give you a quick insider tip on is you'll get the ticket for the parking garage and put it in your wallet, put it in your purse, put it in your day bag, whatever it is that you're taking out, because you don't pay for it as you leave. Or you don't pay for it as you exit the garage with your vehicle. There's usually a place right when you walk into the garage. Like, so from the city, as you walk into the garage, there'll be like a little kiosk. It's called a Kasse. And that's where you pay for it. So I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to my car, forgotten that I've paid, had to walk all the way back downstairs to the Kasse, pay for the ticket, go back up to the car, and then drive away. So just a little insider tip for you. Speaking of parking, when you're out on the streets, don't expect much parking. If you do find parking, hurrah for you, but also expect it to be pretty tight, pretty paralleled parking. And you also, a lot of times, are still going to have to pay for it out on the street. So you'll see, like, again, they're not like kiosks, but they're little like pay machines that you'll have to go put a few coins in, kind of thing, few euros in. You'll get a little slip of paper that you'll then put in your dashboard. Now, if you do find a street parking spot that doesn't have to be paid, then most of the time you are going to still need to put a Parkschein out. So here's your little daily dose of German words to know if you're driving. So a Parkschein is this little blue disc that you should get when you rent your car. It should be already in your rental car. It's this little wheel, like a clock wheel. And when you go to park, you'll see signs up that says like what hours or how long you can park for at a certain place, particularly on the streets. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put whatever time you arrived on your little wheel, and then you'll put it in your dashboard. If you don't put this up, then you'll probably get a ticket if they're checking them. And if you like really go over your time on this, then you're also probably going to get a ticket. So just make sure you have a Parkschein in your car, and that way you can put it up when and if you find a street parking spot. If you want to know what all of these look like what a Parkschein looks like, I've got a full article on driving in Germany on the blog. So you can either go to the blog to find that, or just go over to Google and literally Google wanderingermany.com and then type in driving in Germany. I have loads of photos up on here, including all the major signs that you're going to want to know as well, because I can't really go into all of those here on a podcast because you can't even see them. But you'll see what like an Einbahnstraße sign looks like, which is a one-way street, or what the Ausfahrt sign looks like. Yes, I've lived in Germany for 10 years and I still find the word Ausfahrt funny. But you're also going to want to have a good idea of what some of those other signs that I've mentioned previously look like. So that priority sign, or the end of the priority sign, or the speed limit sign, or the end of the speed limit sign. You'll want to know what all of those look like. And I have all of that on the blog. So make sure you just go look at that so that you have an idea. And better yet, like if you've got a passenger in your car, have them save that article off, and then as you guys are driving, you can use that kind of as a little like mini reference. So speaking of signs, I guess I probably should have mentioned this earlier because it's probably more under the category of like the rules and the laws. However, one of the things that I find tourists really getting caught up on is knowing the speed limits. So obviously it's going to be pretty self-explanatory when you're driving around most of the time. Like there's going to be speed limit signs. On the Autobahn, there's always a speed limit sign. If there isn't a speed limit sign, that means there is no speed limit. You can go. In the cities, the problem is that if you didn't take a German driver's test, you may not know this little secret, and it's not really a secret because it's the law. However, when you're driving in Germany, there's a couple of locations that just have set and predetermined speed limits unless otherwise stated. So unless there is an actual speed limit sign. The ones you really need to be careful of as a tourist is when you are driving on a Bundesstraße, which is like a highway road. It is an automatic speed limit of 100 kilometers an hour. Now, the reason why this is confusing is because when you get onto this street, a lot of times there won't be a speed limit sign because it is just the automatic speed limit. So it can often catch tourists off guard, or like they don't know what they're supposed to be driving, and people behind them are getting mad because they're not driving fast enough, or they're driving too fast and now you just got blitzed. My point is, when you are on these Bundesstraßes, the automatic speed limit is going to be 100 kilometers an hour, and there are plenty of other times that there will be a speed limit change. But again, that will be clearly marked. As you're driving on this street, you'll then see the sign that means the end of that speed limit. Again, if you don't know what those signs are, just go over to the blog because I have those pictures and I describe it. But then again, it doesn't tell you what speed limit to go back to. Well, when you're on the Bundesstraße, it goes right back to 100 kilometers, even if it doesn't say. Speaking of this, there's another sign, does not say the actual number of the speed, but this is when you are driving through towns. So again, this is really you get caught on these when you are driving on these country roads, the Bundesstraßes, the highways, things like that. And what's happening is you're, driving 100 kilometers an hour on these really gorgeous country roads. And then you come up to a village or a town, and you know it's a village or a town because there's always going to be a yellow sign that says the name of the town. Well, when you see that yellow sign, nowhere on it does it say speed limit is now 50 kilometers an hour. However, that is the law. So when you see these yellow town signs, consider them also a speed limit sign of 50 kilometers an hour. Again, you're not going to see that 50 kilometers an hour. And at the end of the village, you're not going to see a new speed limit. You're just going to see that you exited the village because there will be a line through that town's name. And again, now it's assumed that you are just right back to 100 kilometers an hour. Again, unless there's been a sign that has stated otherwise. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is driving in Germany in the winter. So I get asked all the time, how bad is it driving in Germany in the winter? Is it going to blizzard? Is it hard to drive in the snow? Does it get icy? What about the Autobahns? Now, you take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. So I grew up and lived most of my life in Nebraska. And if you know anything about Nebraska, you might know that the winters are pretty horrible. We're talking lots of snow, lots of ice. And yeah, I had to grow up learning to drive and all of that. And so to be honest, I always say that Germany weather is actually quite more mild than what I am used to in the States. So a lot of times I'll tell people the winters here are quite mild. They're not so bad. And then I forget that I'm talking to somebody from Texas or Hawaii who might not be used to this. So like I said, take what I'm about to say with a slight grain of salt. But more or less, there's not a ton of snow in Germany unless you're going kind of deeper down into the Alps. Now, don't get me wrong. It does snow, but most of the time when it does snow, it's a couple of inches tops. And usually the roads don't get too iced over. And especially on places like the Autobahn, they maintain those roads really well, especially when they know that there might be some bad weather coming up. And so they prep those roads, again, especially the Autobahn. So more or less, I would say there's usually not a huge concern. Now, again, that's not to say that there's not going to be an occasional winter storm, and obviously, you just need to exercise caution. If it looks like it might be a little bad, just wait, just hold off. There's no point in risking anything. But for the most part, it's usually not a big concern. You won't need snow chains unless you're really driving up into the mountains. And even then, I would check with where you're going if you would need them. Most likely you won't, though. And the final thing I want to kind of really quickly touch on doesn't even have to do with Germany necessarily. However, I know a lot of travelers who are doing a big road trip and they might be going to a bordering country. So luckily, Germany doesn't have any toll roads. Yay! And they also don't require to have vignettes, which are like these little stickers that you put inside of your car. And when I say stickers, this is different than an environmental sticker. So I guess that is something I should touch on also. So I'll circle back to that after this. But basically what you need to know is if you are pretty much going to any bordering country, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland. I don't think France has a vignette, but they do have lots of tolls. But I'm not 100% sure about that. But all of those ones require you to have a vignette. And they're super easy to get. Most you can actually just kind of Google, Austria vignette. And a lot of them you can even just buy online now. And you just register your car, which is a little hard ahead of time because you won't know your rental car yet, but usually you just need to have your license plate number and then you just pay online. If you don't want to do that, it's super easy to get vignettes because as you're driving, the closer and closer you get to any of these countries, you're going to start seeing signs and seeing things that say you need a vignette. Basically, as soon as you get close to the border, you're going to stop at any gas station, you'll go in and you'll get the vignette that you need. However, be careful that you don't actually cross the border yet, because as soon as you cross the border, if you don't have a vignette, and I'm even talking like one stop down, there's occasionally checks. And yes, you will get fined. And I've heard of people getting fined. It's like 300-400 euros just to not have a vignette. And here's the kicker. I've also heard horror stories that people have gotten their vignettes, but then forgot to actually stick them in their windshield. So be very careful of this because if you have it sitting on your dashboard, it doesn't count, especially if they're doing checks that are like pictures where they'll take a picture and see if you have one up. It being in your dashboard does not count and you will still get fined, even if you bought it. So make sure you look at the sticker and it usually tells you exactly where in the windshield to place it. Depending on which country, it might need to be on the right-hand side, underneath the mirror. It just depends. So make sure you look at the sticker and it'll tell you where to put it up. Speaking of driving to other countries, technically you also do need to let your rental car company know if you are driving to other countries. Usually it's not a big deal. Sometimes they want to charge you more if you go to somewhere like Czech Republic or Poland because there is more theft risk in those places. But technically, you are supposed to let your rental car company know if you're planning on crossing borders. Even though there are no passport checks and it's all in the Schengen agreement, you still need to notify your rental company. Okay, so let's circle back super fast about that environmental sticker. This gets a lot of people worried. Basically, what this is, Germany takes environmental practices very seriously, and there are a couple of cities that do not allow driving in certain zones. There's also several cities that also don't allow you to drive in certain zones if you don't have the correct environmental car sticker. Now, your rental car should come with this. So if you're renting your car in Germany, it should already have one. And 9 times out of 10, I would even probably argue 10 times out of 10, a rental car is going to be the green environmental sticker, which means you can drive in any of these zones. However, in fact, I had a reader reach out to me because they were starting their trip in Switzerland. And it was kind of a big to-do to try to get this sticker. So my first suggestion is to always first go to your rental car company and ask them if they can have it or if they can get it for you. And if not, what should you do next? Whew. Okay, I think that might be it for today. I'm really sorry that this got so long, but there's just so many important parts about driving in Germany that you need to be prepared for before you come, both legally, but also just to make sure that you truly understand what is expected, and also just so that everybody stays safe on the road. So I hope that you either feel a little bit more comfortable about driving in Germany, or you're just really excited to get out there and open up on that Autobahn. Of course, if you ever have any questions about traveling to Germany, or in this case, driving in Germany, you can always reach out to me at Leanna@wanderingermany with an email to leanna@wanderingermany.com. And of course, if you're planning your trip to Germany, don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram @wander.in.germany, TikTok @wanderingermany. You can join our Travel in Bavaria Facebook group. And of course, check out all of my very extensive guides on the blog, wanderingermany.com. Until next time, bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.